2017 Citizens Workshop. I hope you're having a wonderful day. So, today we're going to be reviewing Fledgling by S.K. Ali. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. You've heard me say that I hate when books feel long. This book feels long. I just reread the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. None of those feel long, you know? There's a lot happening in this book, and I think this book could have easily have been a duology, honestly, and it still would have been just as impactful. In fact, I think even more impactful, because it deals with a lot of classism, a lot of classism issues. You have New Earth, Old Earth, you have a bridge connecting New Earth and Old Earth. It makes me think of Total Recall, how society is broken up that way, because they have this, bridge, right? And I think one of my biggest struggles is there were a lot of characters. There were a lot of players in this book. And normally that's not something that bothers me, Perfect example in Dragonlance. You've got Tanis, Kitiara, Raceland, Caramon, Goldmoon, Riverwind, Tika, Flint, and Tasselhoff. That's 9 characters. Not including the gods, who sometimes have their own point of view, and it's so easy to follow that. And I read that god ages ago, and I'm, just reread it last year. That's 9 characters, right? And I think what my issue with this book was, I lost count of how many characters. I think there were really only the twins, the princess, not princess, but we're gonna call her princess for right now. The prince, twin lover, one of the twins' lovers. That's 5 characters. No, 6. See, it was really hard to keep track of the characters in this book because there's a lot of going on. There's a lot that's going on, and it's really, really frustrating to me because I had to keep refreshing my mind and keep going back and be like, wait, who was this character again? What is their position in this novel? And that's another thing. You have Nada, right? And I thought she was really going to be I thought it was just going to be 3 characters, right? Nada, her brother, her twin brother, and then the Princess of New Earth, right? And I thought those were going to be our 3 point of views because they're the ones that are mentioned on the back cover blurb, so I figured, okay, these are going to be my 3 characters, right? I didn't really understand not the hierarchy. I just didn't understand, actually, no, a little bit of the hierarchy, especially with Old Earth and New Earth. I didn't quite understand because Nada keeps getting sent to prison. I'm like, wait, why do they keep sending her to prison? And then sometimes she doesn't always act like someone who is part of royalty, right? She acts like someone who's strictly just part of the underground resistance movement. And it's very, very confusing. It's really, really confusing for me to wrap my head around some of these characters. I'm like, wait. And then, we get more point of views and more introductions. And I'm like, okay, who is this person's part in all this? And then you have the record keeper inserts that break up the story. And those were really interesting. But then that insert tends to be another character. And I'm like, okay, wait, what exactly going on? It was a lot of me going back and forth, and flipping the pages to the point where I got the audiobook and it helped. Listening to the audiobook as I was physically reading it really did help me follow along. And I've never really struggled with a book like this before that deals with classism and issues such as this. I've never ever been that confused keeping track of these characters, and then the world building as well. This is, again, it gave me Total Recall kind of vibes with the tech in the book, so it was very reminiscent of that. But some of the other tech I just didn't quite understand. I wanted to know more about the record keepers and their place in society and why they were, kind of erased altogether. I wanted to know more about Not so much the bride market, because we already kind of knew what was going on in the bride market with young girls, and that was uncomfortable to read, but I do think, it was important for the story. So it wasn't just something that was there to make the reader uncomfortable. It does make you uncomfortable. It's never explicit, but you know what's going on. I just think the world building could have been a little bit more concise. And that's why I think this book could have easily been 2 books. I feel like, because it does say book 1. So my feeling is that the publisher didn't have a whole lot of faith in splitting this book up into a duology, that they had the author, because this is like her first dystopian. She writes a lot of rom-coms, and I've read her rom-coms. I love her rom-coms. I think they're cute and they're great and emotional and thoughtful, So I was very excited to get this arc from the publisher, but I feel like the publisher didn't have a whole lot of faith in this book, and that was their downfall, because it could have easily have been 2 books, and I think if it were 2 books, it would have been stronger. You really would have get those distinct personalities and those distinct characters, right? They would have had more time to flourish and shine on their own, and it would have been much easier to keep track of who's who and what their place is in this book, But considering that the book says, oh, it's a book 1, but I did some research. I'm like, oh my god, this is book 1? Where's book 2? Because I feel like this book came out 2 years ago. I feel like the publisher didn't have a lot of faith in this book, so they negotiated to just have it be condensed into 1 book. Because it feels like it was 2 books, It feels like it was 2 books. And I hate that. I hate that. I think it could have easily have been 2 books and it would have been better. I think if the publisher had invested in it a little bit more, a lot of the aspects of the book, the characterization, the world building, the plot, pacing, I think it would have been fleshed out in a much neater and more concise way that would have been more engaging and would have left me less confused as I'm trying to figure out everyone and remember everyone's position in the book. And it's like, yay, you're part of the underground too? I'm confused. I think it would have been clearer. It would have been more concise. You still could have had a 300-some page book, And I think if the book had been broken up, it would have given a little bit of breathing room, because it just felt like everything was condensed in there. And it ruined with the pacing. It ruined with some of that characterization. It ruined some of that character depth. Some of those character dynamics needed to be a little bit stronger. And I felt like as we got to the end, things were starting to get a little bit too rushed. So it just felt like everything was mushed together. And then it felt rushed at the end. And I just wanted a little bit more clarity as I was reading it, because it was very confusing to me. And I don't like being confused when I read. In fact, it's kind of very hard to confuse me when I'm reading. I mean, I read Martin. And if you read Game of Thrones, there are a hell of a lot of characters. And sometimes it is hard to follow. But again, Dragonlance has 9 different characters. And I'm still able to keep track of every single one of those characters. And I'm never confused. And that's me reading probably 150 Dragonlance books, easily. I have a whole bookcase here, just Dragonlance books. So, or even like I reread Lord of the Rings, and sometimes you just get characters that pop up for a moment or for a couple chapters and then they drop off again. You never hear from them again. So there's clarity. I wanted more clarity. I wanted it to be a little bit more concise. I wanted the pacing to flow a little bit better. I wanted stronger world building. I wanted everything to not feel so condensed and pushed together, because then it ruined all of that. And that's what made it feel long, because I had to keep going back to rereading. And I'm like, wait, what? And like, who are you again? So it just like the structure, the hierarchy of this world, I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. I wanted a little bit more structure. So it was an interesting novel. I just feel like the publisher didn't have enough faith in it to be a duology, and I think it would have been so much better if it had been a duology, honestly. And that really frustrates me. And this is why people self-publish now. And this is why self-publishing gets more credibility, because they have more control over their work. So they can tell the story. And then if a publisher picks them up, then they can edit and flesh things out as necessary. But this is why people go to self-publishing, not just because it's hard to get a publisher, but also because things like this happen. Because she really is a good writer. Again, I've read her rom-coms, and I think her writing is amazing and emotive. I just was not feeling it from this book, unfortunately. So, on that note, thank you all for tuning in. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share with all your book-loving friends. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, happy reading.